to talk about the presidency. I want to talk about you at a white nationalist event giving speeches. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your congressional record, baby. Let's talk about that, because I hope I don't sound ridiculous, but I don't know what this person does all day. I had to go down to the congressional website, honey, to see what bills have you passed, baby. I didn't see not one. What does Marjorie do all day besides going viral on Twitter for being anti-Semitic? Somebody please help me.
So this TikToker by the name of the Luncheon Lawyers points out something that I think we should all really be focusing on. Now this is the secret about Republicans that they don't want you to know. The truth of the matter is that they actually like everything exactly the way it is right now. Republicans already basically have everything they want. Even the Biden administration is basically giving Republicans everything that they want. They're getting the tax breaks that they feel like. We still don't have universal health care. And don't worry, landlords are still able to exploit their tenants, and employers are still able to exploit their workers. In fact, much like the Republicans want, all of that exploitation is getting increasingly worse year over year as the expansion of the sort of Uber-style economy continues. The reality is the conditions for working class people are pretty miserable right now. The cost of living is rapidly increasing, and most of that money is going into the pockets of giant corporations and landlords. So if all that's true, then why are Republicans still so outraged and upset? Well, on some level, it all boils down to the culture war. The reality is, Republicans spend all of their time fear-mongering, going out of their way to viciously attack marginalized people. Right now, it's trans people in the hot seat. But I think we've seen it with basically any community of marginalized people. Republicans at one point or another have decided to hyper-focus on them with their fear-mongering tactic. But why is this? Well, because Republican voters, by and large, do want changes to our healthcare system. They do feel exploited. They know that their landlord is squeezing them. They know that their employer is not giving them fair treatment. So a huge chunk of Republican voters need to be tricked into voting for the Republicans. And the way that Republicans trick them into voting for them is by, instead of focusing on any material needs of these folks, hyper-focusing on marginalized people and creating nonsense cartoons of people that they don't like in order to stir up a vitriolic racist base. And by stirring up all of this vitriol and hatred, they mobilize an increasingly violent base to maintain the status quo, all while they run around pretending that they care about doing something about healthcare or dealing with giant corporations and things like that. Especially when it comes to the populists, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, where they claim to be against big companies like Disney. But of course, they're not going to push any legislation that would hurt Disney, because once again, these Republicans love giant corporations. Most of the people that support Marjorie Taylor Greene and the types of people that did the January 6th insurrection, for example, aren't angry about the exploitation in our system. They're angry because they're not getting a bigger piece of the pie. Most of those folks were like small business owners or mid-level landlords and things like that, where they were angry that the government was working too much for the largest corporations and not working enough for them, the slightly smaller corporation. Which is all really a joke because these people pretend to be in favor of the working class. I mean, think about it for a second. What working class person thinks that employers should be able to discriminate against trans folks? That seems like something really only employers would want the ability to do. Even if you're somebody that is not like a trans rights activist or super on board with trans rights, you still probably would think it's weird if you're a normal working class person to go out of your way to say, no, I definitely think that my employer should discriminate against them. So like, think about it for a second. These right-wingers pretend to be in support of the working class so they can maybe try to win over swing voters based purely off of racism. And all they do is propagate this extreme hatred. They go out of their way to invent people in order to get mad at them. And in doing so, they create racist, sexist, homophobic, and transphobic caricatures of people, all in an attempt to make sure that people remain ignorant, racist, and just bigoted across the board. So of course Marjorie Taylor Greene hasn't proposed any legislation. The system is working exactly as she wants it to. She doesn't care about healthcare or corporate greed or anything like that. The only group of people that Marjorie Taylor Greene is actually standing up for are the people who are angry that they got suspended from Facebook or Twitter for a few days because they were so racist that even those incredibly forgiving platforms took them off for a day or two. It quite literally is a crowd of people whose entire political identity is basically outrage about the fact that their kids are more open-minded than they are.